the Capital Preservation Subcommittee to order. And we have two people on WebEx. Joe, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Representative. I'm here.
Good morning. And Frank, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. And Patrick is not going to join us. And Gordon is in committee, so we welcome Shirley. Only known you 100 years. Okay. So thank you very much. Joe and Frank, the three of us visited the first floor and the fourth floor. So we would like to, without you, we missed you, but you know those locations like the back of your hand. Would you like to start our discussion off? Either? Don't speak at once, Joe or Frank.
Thanks, Representative. My thoughts, and I'm thinking from a standpoint of, we have multiple guides and groups out at one time. And oftentimes on the fourth floor, if, say, the galleries are full, we don't have any other alternative. And it would be nice to have another tour stop and location on a fourth floor, because it's likely we're going by those anyway when we take large groups into the House and Senate on the gallery level. And those, as I recall, are really beautiful spots with some wall sconces on each side that would really frame a piece of art very nicely on that. At the same time, I'm not opposed to first floor. It's the same issue there as well. You've got the 8 murals out in the rotunda. And often if there's multiple groups out there, it would be nice to have another location to take a group if the rotunda is rather full there. So those are kind of my initial thoughts on there, but I would lean more towards a piece of great art on the fourth floor.
And just to respond to you, we did not look at that wall with the sconces there. We looked at the opening to the gallery and then the south wall. However, we looked across. We noted that wall was there with the sconces there. Compared to on the south end, nothing, just open wall, although 3 panels, but one panel had the door to the offices, and the other panel, of course, would lead up the steps. So just to clarify what our actions were. Frank, what would you add?
I guess I would just kind of echo what Joe had stated there. I think it's important that it fits into the tour and that people see it. It's easily defined. So if the fourth floor would be something would add that as a feature to the tour, I think that's an acceptable position.
Question, Joe, when you're giving tours on the fourth floor and there's an overflow going into the gallery, would that location then be appropriate or would not? I mean, you can't give a tour if people are I would just say the overflow. Is that something to consider?
Yeah, it is. And for my clarification, you're talking immediately outside, like the house gallery on those walls there, where that opening and the two concerns there is on days when there is a big legislative issue, oftentimes there are lots of people standing outside the house gallery, and that would make it rather hard to give a tour. And I have had in some instances, as I recall, that the guides are speaking so loudly that that the doorman will come out and say, hey, can you keep it down? Because the noise is going into the chamber and interfering with the meeting. So those would be my only thoughts about having a mural. Otherwise, I think that's it's a good location, but there may be those times when it's rather busy. It would make it hard to interpret the artwork.
Okay. And do you think, both gentlemen, and then of course we'll have our comments, the sconces interfere so that that wall with the sconces maybe we should not use since you have an open wall on the south end? You know, no telling what the artwork is going to look like.
Yeah.
I'm sure they can work in the moon or the sun in those locations, but
Yeah. You know, I don't know that it really matters as long as it's on fourth floor, whether we decide on north or south wings. I think it could fulfill the same purpose in our tour narrative.
okay. Frank, any other
I
comments?
guess I would add too that typically, yeah, so usually our first floor has a lot of public activities going on. There's lots of setups too. So I think the same could be said with all the functions that we're setting up in the main rotunda. It could also be distracting if you're trying to give the tour and trying to speak to that piece. So it's kind of the opposite of the concerns we have on the fourth floor. So maybe that should be taken into consideration, just the level of activity on the first floor.
Okay. Shirley, would you like to make a comment?
The only thing I thought about was,
Use the mic, please.
Madam Chair, the only thing I thought of on the fourth floor between the north and the south, one has lighting on the wall on the north side and the one on the south does not. One of the things we thought a lot about on the lighting is if you're taking a photograph of the mural, the lighting will interfere with a photograph.
Good point. Heather, you're welcome to make a comment. Okay. Right. Well, I remember vividly the exercise of trying to find the wall for the brown mural, and again the story we were talking about as we saw on the fourth floor, the storyline of having the three walls entering the gallery, that is something to consider. The lighting, something to consider. So then perhaps that limits us to on the fourth floor, the south side. And then Frank's comments of a lot of activities, lots of activities on the first floor. Joe, when you have all those activities, are your tours then scheduled after them? How do you compensate for that?
Our most popular tour times for school groups in particular are in the mornings, 10 and 11, and that's usually when say college day or whatever, aviation day. So we just have to work around those, and we do the best we can to give the guests a great experience. But people understand sometimes that the building is busy and it doesn't lend itself to giving something really in depth, but we have to work around those because we exist in the building with lawmakers and constituents, and so we do the best we can on that.
And I guess if we're looking to spread things out, there's nothing on the fourth floor. So this could add to that level. There's everything on first and second and third. So that's something to consider.
Yeah.
So again, going before the full committee, do we have are we presenting it, let's say we only had 2 locations I can remember for the Brown, right, Shirley? And it was just a vote on up or down on either. Do you 2 gentlemen or Shirley have a preference of how we present? I mean, we don't, it doesn't need to be a long drawn out conversation like we're having now, other than highlighting where's our, it's easy to start over. It's easy to identify the negatives. Can't describe too much if the galleries are going. A lot of activities on the first. I'm on. So how do you choose? How do you think we just present the 2? There's only first floor and fourth floor. That's all there's to it. Frank, where's his hand?
Yeah, I guess follow-up observation. What did was there good natural lighting or artificial lighting on that south location? Just trying to consider what the cost would be. They're going to raise money for the art, but can it properly be lit with what we have there now, like we did with the Brown v. Board, or would it take something special? I don't know if you guys were able to assess the lighting in that area.
I don't think there was any additional lighting there. So there would be that issue. And of course, you get no outside from the lighting.
So I think on Brown v. Board, we were able to take the existing ceiling mounted fixture locations and actually add lighting to those locations so it could be more directional to show the art. So that's something I can certainly follow up on when I have an opportunity to go up and look at that location. But it would be a cost associated that we'd have to make where if we can't spend our funds on that, we would have to look at that. Same thing with the wall sconces that you mentioned earlier. I wouldn't want to have to move. So I think the south probably sounds the best.
On that south side, you only had those 3 hanging chandeliers, if I can call them that, down the hallway. There's nothing up against the wall, and there's no directional light toward that wall. Shirley, or you remember? That's the only thing there, those 3 hanging chandeliers. And that would be cost.
I think so long as we communicate that.
Okay.
Cost of the artist, or we can communicate in the RFP when we get to that point, the location, photos of the location, they could come and look at it and understand what the implications are.
And also communicate that to the full committee that there's no additional lighting there. Similar to the 3rd floor location. So Frank, when you did that, how was that done? Was that taken out of the funds for the mural, or that was during reconstruction? I mean, rebuilding?
There was an existing location. I do recall there being some expenses, though, associated with modifying that lighting. And I think those costs were passed on to the fundraising and to the artist, or the effort that was put forth, because it became more of a directional, like LED type, if I recall, some spotlighting.
Right.
And I think that was a request of the artist that's how he envisioned his piece, and the way that the wall washes without shadow. So I just think that's something we would have to consider in working with whoever is selected.
Okay.
Yeah, Frank, as I recall, was there a pendant or a chandelier that was removed in front of that, and then the LED lighting placed?
Yeah, we can usually reuse a location. We can't add a new location or cut into the plaster. So we start to restrict ourselves from the historic preservation. That's what we can cut into. So.
Okay, well, that's something to bring up when we mention those locations to the committee. So for the committee's purpose, do you want to, again, say there's only 2 floors, 1st and 4th. Are we going to identify the walls and then ask the committee to vote? Or are we going to make a recommendation? Just says discussion of possible mural locations. I mean, if we can narrow it down right now.
Yeah, I think we could make a recommendation that we select the fourth floor south based on the conversation, and that can be presented to the full committee.
Fourth floor south, first floor. And the concern about the first floor is just the activities that are held almost on a daily basis, at least during the session.
I think that's a concern, but I also think adding that element of something to the fourth floor is an important part of this discussion, as Joe mentioned, adding to that tour and that experience.
Because on first, right, the women's suffrage memorial will be right off the rotunda. Is it east or west?
East.
East side. Okay. So you'll have that addition there. And so I think the fourth floor seems logical and I think would be beneficial.
Okay. Shirley, would you have okay. Well, if that is our consensus, I believe we've settled that we will recommend to the Capital Preservation Committee the south wing on the fourth floor, noting there may be lighting concerns, but that then is not our concern, but not phrased like that. Okay. The next item then is discussion of other subcommittee business. Have you, Frank and Joe, had the opportunity to look at the letter that Gordon and Chris?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, as well. Yeah.
Okay. It's very self-explanatory, paragraph 1, paragraph 2. Paragraph 3, of course, is it is the main charge of this sponsoring group. I guess my question then, and my question was for Heather, they understand that they have to have certain IRS designation to raise funds. So does there need to be a question about nonprofit status, 501c3? That's just understood, or we are reminding them that they would have to, yeah, and it can be said in a different way, meeting all the requirements of fundraising efforts. Shirley, you have a comment? I would just say due to is not because. It's just a stylistic, because of funding issues in Passage Town. Due to is not because. But that's minor.
Representative Nguyen, this is Chris Wagner from the Revisor's office. I'm letting you know, I am noting, I am noting that change. I'm willing to make any technical corrections and
Oh, yeah.
updates. The only thing, obviously, is who it's going to go to. I left that blank, and then I wasn't sure if you wanted to be the contact person and how you wanted to be contacted. And I can follow up with you later to fill in that blank as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good morning to you.
Morning to you.
Did you all have any discussion as far as the criteria that IRS or whatever the criteria for fundraising, or just when we get to that point, someone come forward and we would ask and determine at that point whether they had the capacity?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little unfamiliar on that end of things. I assume someone we would find would probably be familiar with fundraising and know that they would need to take the proper steps. But yeah, I'm not as familiar on the back end of kind of, I don't know if there's any necessarily statutory requirements for what kind of organization there is, at least not in the statute authorizing the mural, but I assume most of the organizations we'd be seeking would have that 501c3 status or something, you know.
Okay, okay. Frank?
So kind of as a follow-up to that, one question I had was when they come forth with interest, there's typically a submission process, a form that is submitted to, it's actually addressed to the chair of the committee, Patrick, that explains the design or the concept. And it's usually a formal presentation that's made to our committee. I think that's outlined here in the last paragraph as one of the steps, but do we need to include those links or reference where they would find that information so that they could maybe understand what the process will look like?
One would think, is that what you had sent me earlier, the process of, that process, or are you talking about
Well, I think I did send you some examples of like donation forms, and that's kind of getting
Right.
into real specific information. But at some point, a committee will submit a concept or establish themselves as the committee to our full committee, and there's kind of an application form, and I think it's out there on the site, or maybe it's on legislative research site. But there's some formal process that we may need to make reference to. That Jenny Chen had developed back some time ago. I don't know, Joe, do you recall what that looked like?
I don't, Frank, unfortunately.
I'll see what I can find, and maybe I could forward that to
right?
Heather.
And Shirley said Patrick should know, but yes,
Yes,
if
right.
it's part of the process, they need to know it up front.
Yeah. And I didn't know if there was anything in that information that talked about the donation process or the 501c3 or anything else that could be a resource, so that I don't want this letter becoming a real long, lengthy letter. We're just trying to get their attention, but
Right, but they need to know, they need to know
Correct.
all the criteria. We don't need
Right.
anyone coming to say, oh, I didn't know that. That then
Right.
waste their time and waste ours.
Yeah.
So,
And then,
go.
And then my only other comment, again, Chris, I think you covered all the 4 points that we had discussed. I didn't know if we want to give some indication of time or an idea that this is something that we're really trying to move quickly on. We did a nice job of framing the entrance and how long it's taken to get where we're at, but we also maybe need to establish some kind of a response time for level of interest, maybe.
Yes, that was the last thing we spoke of the last meeting. Realizing these are outside, I would imagine they're outside groups, so they don't have the legislative schedule to address, but I sure wouldn't want to go past 6 weeks, a month to 6 weeks, but that's just me. Just being so sensitive that it took so long for the Brown. But that doesn't mean that time is of essence. I mean, what are your, so yes to a time response. Now, what will it be? That's the question. And if we don't have a group, guess we have to wait till someone steps forward, or that we actively engage people that we know are interested, and maybe they'll form a group. But what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Time frame, what are you thinking, Frank, Joe?
What's the method for putting this letter out there? Are you sending it out to interested parties that you're aware of, or is there some kind of a public forum by which we're going to push this out? And then I guess that would start the clock as to, you know, a 60-day time period or responses by.
Right. I would say press release most definitely. And then we could easily have a public press release minimum. To then groups we know that are interested. But what were you thinking? And then once again, press release to museums, you know, getting that list together. Muralist. Anyone spoken to, who's our creative arts person? Curtis Young?
Curtis, yes.
Any communication with him? Obviously not. We'll have to, he surely has contact with groups. What, Frank?
Yeah, we have an RFP currently out for the docking for some sculpture and some artwork, and Curtis had connections in those areas. So I think there is a list by which he can put this out on a public forum. So it may be worth a follow up.
How did you initiate that RFP?
We used an outside architect to do an RFP to draft that and then to put
No,
together.
I'm sorry, that wasn't that was the wrong question. Did you have a press release? Did you have a public event? How did you release that information?
They used some kind of a Kansas arts type forum that they used that solicits that information.
So is it a social media platform? Is that what you're saying?
I believe so.
Okay.
I will follow up and send some information through Heather on what that means.
Okay. Does this committee have its own spot website? I mean, so it could own its own page. Okay, so it can issue that way. No. It can't say that there's a request for sponsorship? Okay. Are there restrictions to creating and establishing a separate web page for the mural? You know anything about that, Frank or Joe?
I do not. I should clarify, when I was speaking of the artist, we already knew what the concept was. I guess here we're looking for interest from an organization or a group.
Correct.
I don't know, would the Kansas State Historical Society site be an appropriate way to put that out? I mean, to me, it seems appropriate for what we're trying to do since it's tied to the State House and what their function is.
Patrick is sick today.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So that is something we need to find out immediately. Does Heather know does Heather know the link that you're speaking of? Or is that Historical Society? Oh, Heather has it, okay. So, and just insert it like at the end of paragraph 3. The link for the applications and things that you mentioned, Frank.
Yes, I think we should make reference to our site, and then they could go out there and pull additional information without us specifically mentioning it at all.
Okay, and that's at the end of paragraph 3. At the end of the letter. Okay,
Yes.
Before you finish the letter. Okay, got that. But any other corrections or changes to the letter itself? Joe or Frank or Chris or Shirley? I would probably put my staff's, my OA's phone number, office phone number, as well as my cell. I wouldn't mind. I don't want to miss anybody's interest. back to the, we'll figure out the way to distribute, the best way to distribute. Noting, asking Curtis, help me, what's his name again? Young, with the Creative Arts, and Patrick Zollner with the Historical Society, and any other social media platforms. And we're still back to response time.
Right. Can this be distributed again amongst your peers through legislative research? Can this go to other members in case they know other organizations or someone who would want to champion this?
And can I sign this and put it on the desk of all legislators? Okay, I can do that come Wednesday or so. Now we're back to response time.
I don't know that I would go more than 30 days. I think we need to see what level of interest is out there. And if we don't get any interest, we need to reconvene and reassess our approach. But that seems appropriate to me.
4 weeks. Joe?
That seems reasonable. As
Okay.
kind of a new person at this process, so I'm more willing to listen and help.
Oh, you're not alone. This is a new
Thank-
process.
Thank you.
So then once we insert the link, communicate to Curtis Young and Zollner about the Historical Society and any other social media platforms, as well as distribute on the chair, on the desk of I'll say the House and the Senate. I'll need to get a senator. We've got Senator Bowers on the committee. So that means distribution date, our target date is Day's the 10th. 21st, 27th. Next week, probably just too helter-skelter. Probably wasn't the proper term for me to use. I apologize.
Do we think we'd be ready to put by a week from today? Or are you thinking the following week as far as
I'm thinking,
release? That's what.
yes, I'm thinking the week of the 20th. We're not here on the 20th, but surely when we come back, we're
Correct.
ready to go. I can have it on the desk on the 21st.
Okay.
So January 21st, excuse me, the week of the January 20th, or, well, you're not here on the 20th. So 21st. Okay. And that would be then February 21st on a Friday. In the meantime, we'll make the corrections, have the inserts, and then distribute the clean copy to the committee members, all committee members. Okay.
Representative Wayne, I guess I did have one other, I had like a deer and then a blank for an organization's name, but should I put just, I guess, more of a general heading there then instead, since it's going to probably be distributed to multiple people and not a target group?
Okay. Heather said we can make it a memo concerning the first Kansas colored mural proposal, project, mural, end of that,
All right, that sounds good.
right? And
Great.
any other information, just general information other than contact necessary? I think this is self-explanatory, to tell you the truth. What were we going to say? What other things we haven't covered? Just that
So upon receiving the response, I guess after receiving the responses, would we need to again reconvene as the full subcommittee? And then do we have a criteria by which we would select if we have multiple interested parties?
that's that's what Heather and I were discussing earlier. Yeah. Yes, we would have to reconvene, and it's almost, I have a little challenge by not telling the groups the criteria first, but we don't have it. So someone says, that's why I was asking, so you say you can raise money. What proof do you have? I guess this would be maybe the conversation. We could think of criteria. I mean, it stands out. You know, I come to you and I said, I've raised $4 million and here's evidence. Well, you look like you're pretty strong in doing that. But then another group comes and says, here's my first opportunity, and I don't have a track record. So in response to, are we looking for those who have track records, or are we looking for those, again, how do we measure capacity? That's what you're asking. But
Right.
I think maybe,
Or they're going to ask you the question, how much money are we supposed to raise? And we don't know the answer because we don't know what their design is.
right, but we
So-
said minimum 100,000 already. Remember we noted that that's kind of the range of, I think what the women's suffragists came to us when they had 30, I think. But last time, I think Patrick said he thought 75 was maybe 75 to 100, what the Brown mural had cost. Do you have record of that? But the good answer. I mean, we're
Right.
5-10 years later.
75
Artists-
was the suffrage memorial. That was the contract we most recently wrote with the artist on the suffrage. Do we want to include?
You're frozen.
Might have froze up. Did you?
There you go. Do we want to include what? Talk fast.
Do we want to give them a range of an anticipated cost so they understand what they're committing to, even if we say could be 100,000?
You know, I don't think that is a problem. But do we know? That's the challenge. But I would say minimum.
Yeah.
You're saying we would want to. It may be cleaner just having that conversation though, than putting it down on paper. Like, well, you just said 100,000. Well, we didn't know it was going to cost 200.
Right.
Yet the sponsoring group, once they start talking to artists, the artist will say, you know, my cost is X. So that would tell them how much they would have to raise.
I guess I'm fine with that approach, not putting it in the letter. It seems like you're going to be receiving those questions since you're the contact on the letter. So
Yeah.
as long as our message and our response is consistent, I think everybody has an
Exactly.
opportunity. So
Exactly. Because I'm not choosing anybody, you know, but I don't want to
Right.
mislead them either. Here's a question. After 30 days, if there are sufficient number and quality of groups, how soon do we plan on meeting to keep this ball rolling? We need to be abreast of the legislative session. I mean, legislative schedule. We can meet at lunch, noon.
Right.
So that man, but I would, and here's something though, it will come from those forms, I guess. What do they have to submit? Do you know, remember what's on the forms that they have to submit for proof of capacity? Oh, Heather has it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather O'Hara with Legislative Research. So looking at a request for approval to place artwork or exhibits in the Capitol form, date submitted, contact information, name of the artwork or exhibit, a project description that should include a detailed description and a statement of purpose. If the work addresses important themes in the history of Kansas, this should also be addressed. The description should be no longer than 1 page. Whether the project is considered for permanent display or long-term display, how you desire the art or exhibit to be displayed, whether on the wall, independent display, pedestal, or other, and requesting the following: to donate the artwork or exhibit to the state of Kansas, loan the artwork or exhibit to the state of Kansas, or to be commissioned by the state of Kansas to create this artwork or exhibit and paid in the dollar amount for this work. Agreeing to statements, I understand and agree that the state of Kansas will not carry specialized insurance to cover the value of the work. And also, I understand and agree if the project is approved for permanent installation, I will need to grant the state of Kansas fair use of images for the work. And then the following documents must be attached for this form to be complete: the resume of the creator of the work or exhibit and images of the proposed work. And then those proposals are submitted to the chairperson of the Capital Preservation Committee.
Okay, Frank, I thought you said there was a form that established criteria for applying to do something. That doesn't fit our
Right.
need.
I believe I misspoke, but what Heather just cited was what I was referring to from previous projects that I have been involved in.
Okay,
Yeah, we're kind of unique. We're kind of after the fact because it's already been approved as a bill. Usually it's kind of the opposite. They're coming to us and then we're developing it and approving it, and it's getting legislative support. So this is unique.
yeah, that addresses an artist putting work here. That doesn't address a group applying to be the sponsor. Are there any forms that address that?
Yeah. Not to my knowledge. I believe League of Women Voters is who brought what Heather cited to the committee back when they were starting the effort to raise money for the suffrage. That's where I read.
Okay, okay. Then we have no criteria. How do we measure capacity? How do we choose a group? We have no criteria.
Correct.
Can legislative research work that up? I mean, we would, what do we want a group to present to us? Past projects, past fundraising activities, individuals. Do they have a board, or do they have a, here we go again, 501c3, are they non-for-profit? Do we care if they're non-for-profit? Frank, Joe, Shirley.
I'll offer a comment. I think because we're going to be essentially entering a contract with these individuals, we have to know a little bit of something about their organization. And I think that information needs to be provided by whoever is submitting.
Yeah.
We would want to know that instead of knowing it after the fact and understanding there might be an issue or conflict.
Exactly. So we've made full circle. Does that information need to be in this letter? At least some statement. It seems that some statement needs to say, provide a brief description of your organizational capacity to fulfill this obligation. I could have said that 15 minutes ago.
I think that's well stated there.
I couldn't repeat it, so I hope you got it the first time. Okay. And that should separate those who just want to participate. And then if there are individuals, as we said, there's some representatives from Fort Scott who said they wanted to be involved. They then, we can connect them, like myself, to that sponsoring group that emerges as the group that will take the lead. Also telling them that they welcome, and I guess this comes from the conversation, that they would welcome individuals to help them. Maybe not, I don't know how organizations are, if the League of Women Voters would have objected or would have welcomed individual people joining them, but at least they should be open to other people helping them raise funds. But that understandably, and here again is a question, Frank and Joe and Shirley, do we restrict, I think we had this conversation before, do we restrict funds being donated directly from individuals into this fund? You know, my grandma dies and she left $500,000. Can I, as an individual, donate it to the fund for the mural? Or is that a restriction that the sponsoring group determines who donates and who doesn't donate? I'm just thinking of all kinds of scenarios that could happen.
I believe anybody can donate to the Department of Administration fund for that purpose. That fund has been established now per legislative action, and I think anybody could make a donation to that. It's not tax deductible. I mean, you lose some of the benefits of going through an organization potentially from a tax standpoint.
Okay. But still in the conversation, and prior to receiving any responses, I would want legislative research to help me with at least a list of information, discussion points that we speak to so that all will get the same information. You know, if you call me at 12 noon or you call me at 6 p.m., you still get the same criteria, the same information. Seems like every time is a new experience. Joe, any other comments? Frank, any other comments?
No.
And of course, if you think of something, communicate to Heather. Was Senator going to be on? The Senator's not here? Okay. Okay, then. So as a wrap-up then, we have a consensus that the fourth floor south location will we will recommend that to the full board whenever we meet. This letter will go out January 21st, and that we will communicate with Curtis Young, Creative Arts, as well as Patrick Zollner, State Historical Society, as well as distributing to the legislators and the senators via my signature on the House side, asking Senator Bowers on the Senate side, and any other individuals we may think. Those names will go to legislative research, and then you can send us a list of where, at least at that point, who received it. Okay? Does that sound like the conclusion, Shirley, Joe, and Frank, will be discussed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. But that within the next few days after that goes out, I'll work with Heather and make sure we have similar criteria to discuss with those who would call, and I'll forward that to everybody else as well.
Representative Wayne, I just have one more point. I guess if you want to give the contact information to Heather, I'll follow up with her, make sure I'm capturing all of the notes from the discussion today and also insert that, that contact information as well. And then I don't know, like, as far as format, like what, if we're using your letterhead or whatever, but I'll work with Heather and we can work with you and kind of get that finalized.
Okay, and we will then ask one more swipe around for the committee members to do a review before it goes out. So Frank and Joe, look for the final version of this letter coming across your email, and then give us a go-ahead for any further changes, corrections, additions. All right? Joe,
Very good.
Frank. Okay.
All right.
And that will come to you, can we get that no later than next week? Heather, like, okay,
Yeah, that won't be a problem, Representative.
okay. Give you a couple days to look at it, and then get back to us. Any other information we have not covered? I don't know what else is on that agenda. I think that's it on the agenda, isn't it? Yeah. Closing comments, Joe or Frank?
Nope. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, you should have the final version of this letter, the day's the 10th, no later than perhaps the 15th, Heather? And then take please to a day or so to review, get it back to Heather, and we'll be ready to send out on the 21st. Question, Heather, do I speak to Curtis? You have his number? Okay, I'll speak to Curtis, we'll speak to Patrick, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
And of course, if you think of something, then let us know, ASAP. Good? No other comments, questions? Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.